It's pretty staggering, isn't it, how fast the world of work is changing.
It really is.
You hear these big numbers, like millions of jobs shifting because of automation. But, well, let's try and unpack what's really
Yeah,
happening.
let's get into it.
Because today we're doing a deep dive into the forces reshaping the job market.
Exactly. And we've got two really interesting sources to look at. First, there's occupational polarization in South Africa. That's the SALDRU working paper.
Okay.
It gives a great.
Oh, our listeners got something to share. Let's hear it.
Hi, nice to be on the call. My name's Aidan Horn, the primary author of this SALDRU working paper. Yeah,
You're right, that's SALDRU.
Easy to miss here.
It stands for Southern Africa Labor and Development Research Unit.
They're based at the University of Cape Town.
And they put out a lot of really interesting work on labor markets.
This particular working paper takes a deep dive into how jobs have changed in South Africa,
Using a lot of detailed data.
which is what makes it such a valuable source for understanding these trends.
And pull out the really crucial stuff for you.
And what's fascinating is this core question that kind of runs through both reports we're looking at.
Which
Is
is
the job market becoming, more polarized?
like an hourglass.
More high-skill jobs, more low-skill jobs, but fewer in the middle.
Right, the hollowing out idea.
Exactly. And how are things like tech, AI, the green transition, all these global trends, how are they actually shaping the jobs of tomorrow?
Okay, let's start with South Africa then. That SALDRU paper, it digs into a lot of labor market data over time.
It does, yeah. They use the quarterly labor force survey, the QLFS, and also the National Income Dynamics Study, NIRD. Oh, go for it.
yeah, thanks. I just want to highlight that the main data set we use is the Post-Apartheid Labor Market Series, PALMS, which joins together the current quarterly labor force survey with earlier labor force surveys from Stats SA, like the semi-annual labor force survey, and earlier on in the mid-1990s, it was the October household survey. However, we only delved a bit into the National Income Dynamics Study, or NIDS, to just describe what occupations are used in NIDS, which occupational classification is used in NIDS, but we didn't go into so much detail with NIDS.
Absolutely, you got the key idea there.
It's the Post-Apartheid Labor Market Series, POMS.
And it pulls together all that important survey data over time.
You're right, it uses the QLFS, the labor force survey,
And even earlier data stretching back to the mid-90s.
which makes it invaluable for seeing those long-term trends.
And you're spot on. They do mention the National Income Dynamics Study, NIDS.
What's fascinating here is how they dealt with the different occupational classifications.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit then.
Because one of the first things the paper highlights
Uh-huh.
is the challenge of comparing job data over so many years.
Right, because things change.
Exactly. The way jobs are defined and categorized isn't constant.
So it's not a straightforward comparison.
Not at all. They point out that South Africa uses SASCO,
SASCO.
which is based on an older international system called ISCO 88.
Okay.
But then NEDS uses a more recent one, ISCO 08.
So how did they handle that difference?
Well, the researchers had to do a lot of work to map the two systems together.
Like creating a Rosetta Stone for job codes.
Precisely. That mapping was crucial to identify real trends.
Makes sense. You need that baseline.
Definitely. It's a really important piece of the puzzle.
So keeping in mind those data complexities.
What were some of the key employment trends they found?
Well, one notable shift was the growth in corporate managers.
It seemed to jump from about 2% of the workforce in 95.
Up to around 6% by the year 2020.
Quite a significant increase over that period.
Interesting. Any thoughts on what drove that?
The paper mainly focuses on documenting these shifts rather than diving deep into the reasons behind them.
Still, it's a striking change.
They also pointed out some data inconsistencies.
Oh, like what?
For example, a coding issue around teaching associate professionals in 97.
Data quirks. You always find them.
Indeed. Now, what about the informal economy?
How well was that captured in the PALMS data?
They noted improvements from around the year 2000,
That's good to hear.
especially regarding the inclusion of street vendors in the data.
More accurate representation then.
Yes. However, they did encounter significant data problems
Oh,
with subsistence farming and fishery workers after 2000.
to the point where they couldn't really analyze that group.
Exactly. It highlights the real challenges in data collection.
So having navigated these data hurdles,
What did they discover about earnings polarization in South Africa?
right, they focused on the period between 2000 and 2017.
And they didn't find the same level of extreme polarization.
Oh, that we've seen in some other countries?
Their analysis suggested a more tempered shift.
Interesting. So what did happen with earnings?
Well, the top third of earners did see their share increase,
Okay, the higher earners gained a larger slice.
while the middle third actually saw a slight decrease
A bit of a squeeze in the middle then.
in terms of the proportion of the total earnings.
And what about the bottom third of earners?
They saw a moderate rise in the number of people employed,
Okay,
but their overall share of earnings remained relatively stable.
nuanced indeed. What about average wages themselves?
Figure 6 in the paper shows that the bottom third
Yeah.
actually experienced an increase in their average real wages.
That's a positive development.
And what's quite interesting is that by the end of the period,
Uh-huh.
some lower skill wages began to overlap with middle skill wages.
Really? A narrowing of the gap at the lower end?
Yes. Meanwhile, middle skill wages tended to stagnate.
Hmm. And the very top earners?
They did observe a widening gap between the top 15%
Okay,
and the rest of the income distribution.
so the very top pulled further ahead.
That seems to be the overall picture.
You also mentioned they used a machine learning technique
That's right, K-nearest neighbors, or KNN,
to deal with some of the missing job code data.
particularly in the earlier says of the dataset.
Can you give us a quick rundown of how that works?
Essentially, the algorithm looks at individuals with similar characteristics
Okay,
and uses their job codes to fill in the missing ones.
so finding the closest matches.
Exactly. Figure 12 in the paper illustrates how much data
Right.
was actually imputed, especially in those earlier surveys.
That really gives us a good grasp of the South African context.
Definitely a more complex picture than simple polarization.
Okay, let's switch gears now and look at the global perspective.
The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025.
Well, they note that global unemployment is relatively low.
Around 4.9%, but as always,
There's more to the story.
significant variations exist based on income level and gender,
Uh-huh.
and those are the economies expected to see the biggest growth
Right.
in their working age populations going forward.
So more people entering the workforce in those areas.
Globally, the largest absolute job growth is expected
Really?
in roles like farm workers, delivery drivers, and construction workers.
That's quite interesting.
Also, salespersons and food processing workers are projected to grow,
Shows the ongoing need for those essential roles.
and significant growth in care and education jobs as well.
Fundamental human services.
But then, if you look at the fastest growing jobs in percentage terms,
This is where the tech influence comes in?
absolutely, big data specialists, fintech engineers,
Got it.
and those in the high machine learning are leading the way.
Okay.
Green transition jobs are also seeing rapid percentage growth.
So a real mix of tech, green, and essential services.
A key finding is that most employers see increased digital access
Right. More people getting online.
as the most significant driver of change.
What about generative AI specifically?
It has the potential to enhance human work, possibly taking over some tasks involving tacit knowledge,
Interesting.
and potentially empowering those in less specialized roles.
Or augmenting the skills of professionals.
Exactly, but there's a potential downside.
Which is?
If not managed carefully, it could displace human workers
Right.
and worsen existing inequalities.
A real balancing act.
Very much so.
What other major global factors are on employers' radars?
Geoeconomic fragmentation is a significant concern.
Trade issues, supply chain disruption.
Precisely. And the green transition is a massive factor.
And that's creating jobs, as we discussed.
Yes, green jobs appear to be quite resilient,
Of course, there's always job displacement. Which roles are most at risk?
the ones you might expect. Cashiers, ticket clerks,
Makes sense.
and data entry clerks are seen as most likely to decline.
So, when you consider all these global trends,
Technology stands out as the biggest single disruptor.
more so than, say, slow economic growth.
Yes, AI and increased digital access are projected to create many jobs.
Wow. So, technology is both a major creator and destroyer of jobs.
Absolutely. Which leads us to skills. What are the essential skills employers will need?
It's a diverse set. Analytical thinking is at the top,
Okay.
followed by resilience and flexibility. Those make sense.
Leadership, social influence, and creative thinking are also key.
Definitely important human skills.
And specifically, skills in AI, big data, and cybersecurity.
It's interesting how those human skills are ranked so highly,
It really highlights a crucial point in the report.
that alongside the more technical skills.
Current generative AI has limitations, so those human abilities
Right.
remain incredibly valuable.
So, with these changing skill demands,
There's a growing global investment in employee training.
and how are companies approaching talent acquisition and retention?
They're increasingly focusing on employee health and well-being.
That's a welcome shift.
And they're looking beyond traditional university degrees.
A broader view of what constitutes valuable talent.
It appears so.
Okay, that's a comprehensive overview from both reports.
So from South Africa, we see nuanced shifts rather than extreme polarization.
A more complex picture emerges there.
And globally, technology and the green transition are huge forces.
Right, alongside those essential human-centric roles.
Crucially, human-centered skills remain absolutely vital.
Uh-huh.
And ultimately, the ability to adapt and learn continuously is key.
So as you continue to think about all of this,
Perhaps explore resources related to future skills in your field.
because the world of work is constantly evolving.
Staying informed and adaptable will be crucial. Thanks for being here.
Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, thank you for letting me participate.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure having you join in.
We really value your participation and your thoughts.
It makes the conversation so much richer for us.
Exactly. We're so glad you felt comfortable chiming in,
We hope you found some of this discussion interesting.
and we definitely appreciate you being here with us.
It wouldn't be the same without your input.
Until our next deep dive into another fascinating topic.
We look forward to having you listen again soon.
And please always feel free to jump in whenever you have something to add.
That's what makes this special, our connection with you.
Thanks again for being such a wonderful listener.
We'll catch you next time with more insights.
Goodbye for now.
Take care.